Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I'm doing a review for a book that's probably going to be in my favorite books of the year, which is Middlegame by Sean McGuire. I just recently read this and loved it. And as I said, this is probably going to make it into my favorite books of the year, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about it. So this is a book that's going to be incredibly difficult to explain like what it is, because it's not like anything I've read before. I would say this is probably sci-fantasy. It takes place in modern day United States. It takes place between like the 80s up through 2016, and we're following multiple perspectives in this, but our two main characters are Roger and Dodger. So Roger and Dodger were created by an alchemist. This alchemist named James Reed has the goal to use his alchemy to harness the forces and the secrets of the universe to give himself godlike power and like take over the world. And the way he is doing this is by running experiments on sets of twins using his alchemy. And Roger and Dodger are one of these sets of twins that this alchemist is using to try and achieve these powers. Part of this alchemist's plan and part of his experiment is that he has to keep Roger and Dodger away from each other while they are growing up. But as we're following Roger and Dodger throughout their lives, they keep finding each other over and over again because they are pulled together by a force beyond their understanding. Before diving into the rest of the review, I do want to put some content warnings on this for suicide and self-harm, and then also for violence. There is a lot of like killing people and then using their body parts for alchemy. It's not excessively graphic, but I can definitely see it being disturbing to some people, so keep that in mind. But as I said, I loved this book. It is not at all what I was expecting it to be, and I don't feel like there's really any way of explaining what it is. There's nothing to really compare it to that I can think of, and it's so weird and so confusing, but in the best way. It's the kind of book that you really have to pay attention to the whole time. It takes all of your attention, so it can be kind of tiring to read because you can't skim or skip or multitask or half pay attention or read it when you're tired or anything like that, because it really requires all of your attention to try and understand what's happening. My main experience of reading this book was just I am confusion. Like, I felt like I never totally knew what was going on, but as I said, like in the best way. This had just the right kind of balance of giving you enough information so that you felt engaged, but also keeping you on your toes and keeping you guessing. And I love books that are able to find that balance. I think one of the things that really works for this and makes that balance work is that there are kind of two pieces to the story. There's this larger story about the alchemist and what he's trying to do, how he's trying to harness these powers and use these twins to get his power. And that's the part that I always felt like I never quite understood. But along with that, we have this smaller story of following Roger and Dodger, the brother and sister, and their lives, their relationship. And this smaller, more personal story, I feel like we really understand what's going on a lot better because it's a much more personal story about these two characters. And so it created this balance that I worked really well for me, at least, where I felt like I knew enough of what was going on because I could be really invested in the story of these two characters and their relationship and them finding each other and their connection, even though I didn't really understand what was happening in the larger scope of the alchemist's story. It felt like a story that was both so big and so small and intimate. It was so weird, but also such a human story because it's about these big like forces of the universe, but it's also about this brother and sister who love each other fiercely. They're, you know, finding each other again and again. Their fallings out. Sometimes they fight, sometimes they hurt each other, but ultimately they love each other and they will always find each other and fight for each other. I loved the characters Roger and Dodger. I loved the two of them individually, and I loved their relationship, and I just loved that balance. I loved these characters and their relationship. It was just so amazing. I only have 2 critiques for this. One being that the first 50 pages was a little bit tough to get into because it really just throws you in, and since we're not invested in the characters yet, it just is a lot of unknown and it's hard to understand what's going on. But after that first 50 pages, I was totally into it, and as I said, like totally invested, and the balance was perfect. The other critique that I have is just the ending did feel a little anticlimactic, but also it worked really well. I was very conflicted about how it ended because I did, as I said, feel like it was a little anticlimactic compared to like the build of the whole story, but it still matched the story really well, and that's one of the things that matters a lot to me. It wasn't like satisfying in that really like everything's wrapped up, we totally understand, get all of the answers, it's all in a nice little bow kind of ending. And so I felt like at the end it was a satisfactory ending, but not necessarily a satisfying ending. One of the things that I also really liked about this was that it's not a totally like linear timeline in the storytelling, and that is something I'm finding out that I really like in storytelling, like a non-linear storytelling. The very first page starts with that it is 5 seconds too late, 30 seconds before the end of the world, and someone is dying, and then it jumps back to how did we get to that place? And there are moments interspersed throughout the story where we're brought to different versions of that same moment of 5 seconds too late, 30 seconds before the end of the world. And I find that like non-linear storytelling to be really interesting and really engaging. Something else that I thought was really interesting is that there were excerpts in this book from another book of fairy tales that has not been written yet. So it's a book of fairy tales that they liken to like the Wizard of Oz, but is not the Wizard of Oz, but it's kind of like a version of that that exists in this world. And it runs parallel to what is happening to these characters in this book. I looked up the book, and it looks like Seanan McGuire is going to write this companion book of fairy tales under the name of the author of that book of fairy tales that's in this book. And I am so excited for that. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna like the book itself, but I'm so curious to see what is that book going to be. And I'm wondering if getting to read that other book will explain things about what was happening in this. I'm really interested in seeing what that other book will be, and I thought that also that having those excerpts from it added a really interesting like layer to the story. But overall, I loved this book. I have read a few other books by Seanan McGuire, pretty much just her Wayward Children series, and liked those. Those were a lot of fun, but this book is just like masterful, and it is brutal, and it is so good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This is going to be in my favorite books of the year. Highly recommend it. If you're at all interested in this and you don't mind the content warnings that I said at the beginning, highly recommend. Totally should read it. This book, as I said, it just was like, it was masterful. So that is all for my review of Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. If you've also read this, let me know. I don't even know how I would talk about this book, but like, I would love to discuss it with you guys. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.